In a secret location in Europe, war crimes investigators are piecing together vital new evidence against the Syrian leadership. Evidence drawn from the regime's own meticulously documented records. Evidence which could be the key to justice for the families of the disappeared. Mariam Halak, a head teacher from Damascus, was once a supporter of President Assad. She opposed the protests that swept Syria in 2011 until she was won over by her youngest son, Aham, here on the left, a dentistry graduate who joined the demonstrations.
عيونه عم تلمع وشه أحمر هيك يعني فرحة هيك كان.
As the regime responded with violence, Mariam's son started working for a human rights organisation, documenting the mass arrest of protesters. Until he was arrested, he was tortured, released, then detained again, and disappeared. Mariam believed Aham had been taken to Security Branch 215, run by Syria's military intelligence. And for a year and a half she pursued the regime, demanding information about her son, until one day an official took pity on her and gave her this note.
لفت انتباهي مباشرة كلمة جثة 320. صرخت صار جثة وإلى رقم.
Mariam was given a death certificate. Her son had died just 6 days after being detained. They said the cause of death, his heart and breathing stopping. They refused to tell her what had happened to his body. 10 months later, images smuggled out by a regime defector were published by a Syrian NGO. The so-called Caesar photographs, and a warning they are terrible images, show over 6,700 people who died while in custody. The defector said they were taken by the regime, their meticulous record-keeping coming back to haunt them. Every corpse given a number alongside the number of a security branch. Among the photographs, a distressing picture of Mariam's dead son. Written on his forehead, Corpse 320, Security Branch 215.
هلا بس كمان استخبرت حسيت شفت الصورة كمان هيك نزل راحة كتير كبيرة ولا حاملتها معي بالموبايل يعني إنه هي إثبات هي إنه آخر لحظاته هي إنه هيك كونه ما شفته ما شفنا جثته فهلا أحيانا عملنا مجموعات ورشات نوع العدالة الانتقالية فبسألون شو الطلب شو بتطلبي بس إذا صارت الأمور بقول له بدي أبر لابني بدي محاكمة لبشار الأسد ورؤساء الفروع الأمنية كلها محاكمة.
In the absence of any immediate international prosecution, Bill Wiley and his team of investigators are hoping to deliver justice for Mariam and many like her. Head of the Commission for International Justice and Accountability, a private non-profit organisation funded by Western governments, he says they've uncovered vital new evidence against the leadership of Syria's military intelligence. And that evidence comes from the military intelligence's own internal communications obtained by investigators. Shown exclusively to Channel 4 News, it reveals it was known detainees were being tortured and the numbers dying were rising. The head of Syria's military intelligence asked to be informed about every detainee death and even consulted on what to do with some corpses. A December 2012 circular to the Military Intelligence Department, signed by its head, asks that
when any detainee dies in the prisons of the branches of the department, their status is then presented to the head of the department on the same day by telegram regarding the reasons for their arrest, the findings of their interrogation, and the causes of death.
This is a fantastic piece of evidence because it shows that the head of military intelligence was briefed on every single death of an individual in his custody. He was, at his own request, consistently put on notice of the deaths of detainees for which he in law was ultimately responsible.
A memo of one meeting of military intelligence officers in 2013 reiterates how detainees should be treated.
It is imperative to attend to the cleanliness of the prison and all their facilities and the hygiene and health of the detainees, to preserve lives and reduce deaths, which have considerably risen lately. So there's a clear admission that there's a problem with detainees dying. And they talk about reducing deaths. The discussion should be on eliminating deaths. Why are deaths happening?
The memo, which was sent to the head of military intelligence, also stresses how the detainees shouldn't be treated. They shouldn't be beaten, humiliated or detained arbitrarily. But it goes on to acknowledge
certain errors made by some department branches were reviewed, including arbitrary detention, the use of intensity, beating and torture of detainees, etc., emphasising the imperative of averting these issues.
Torturing, murdering detainees are not certain errors, criminal acts and of a widespread and indeed systematic nature. These are crimes against the certain errors referred to here in our language as international criminal lawyers and investigators is crimes against humanity. Yeah.
this, perhaps the biggest breakthrough of all. Documents from within the regime, which investigators say are linked to the corpses in the Caesar photographs. It's a report of a detainee death addressed to the head of military intelligence. It alleges the detainee was a terrorist, a broad definition often used by the regime to describe anyone who opposes it. He was taken to Military Hospital 601, where he died. Once again, the cause given, heart and breathing stopping. It then says the body was taken to the hospital's refrigerator with the number 2668. The investigators cross-checked the detainee's number with the Caesar photographs and found corpse number 2668, security branch 227. He appears to have had his eye gouged out. The document recommends that the body is kept, no mention of returning it to the family, and that it is buried in a known place, asking the head of military intelligence to make a decision. It's signed by the head of Security Branch 227, where more than 2,000 of the detainees whose bodies appear in the Caesar photographs were held. Channel 4 News has seen several more of these signed death reports and their matching Caesar photographs.
Basically, these kinds of matches, in a nutshell, corroborate the authenticity of the Caesar photos. This is corroboration of the photos by the regime itself.
Okay.
Last year, when President Assad was questioned about the Caesar photographs, he said this.
Who verified the pictures? Who they verified that they're not edited and photoshopped and so on? It's just propaganda, it's just fake news. They want to demonize the Syrian government. In every war, you can have any individual crime. It happened all over the world, anywhere, but it's not a policy.
With respect to President Assad, what he's saying is nonsense. And if he wants to get out from under this situation, he's going to have to come up with a far more plausible explanation for the existence of these documents and the existence of these photographs. And there isn't one. People were murdered.
Mariam, who knows too well that the photo of her dead son is real, is now in Germany.
The people that we speak with from the federal police, they do their homework and they prepare well for these witness interviews. And of course they will be aware.
She's joined a case filed last year by Syrian torture survivors and a group of Berlin-based lawyers, the European Centre for Constitutional and Human Rights, against the Syrian regime. One of the lawyers spearheading the case is Mazen Darwish. Mariam's son Aham was working for Mazen's human rights organisation in Damascus, the Syrian Centre for Media and Freedom of Expression, in 2012, when alongside colleagues they were both arrested.
Is a sample for what I think anyone dream to have a son or brother like him.
Mazen spent 3.5 years in regime detention, where he says his captors, thinking they had beaten him to death, left his body with corpses.
Try to move and feel there is a body, start understand this is a dead body and I can't move even 1 inch. Just feel very scared. And suddenly I heard the voice that said, "Sir, this guy is still alive."
Mazen and Mariam have both given their testimony against the Syrian regime to German federal police. And in June this year, Jamil Hassan, the head of Syria's Air Force intelligence, where Mazen was tortured, was the first high-level suspect to be issued with an international arrest warrant by Germany's chief federal prosecutor for crimes against humanity.
I get the call and I answer and start dancing and laughing.
حسيت يعني ببعض الفرح انه يعني جهودنا ما عم تضيع وانه هي خطوه اولى لتحقيق العداله وان شاء الله كمان بتصدر بحق الكل اللي عم يشتغلوا بالامن وعم يقتلوا شبابنا يعني اولادنا.
Jamil Hassan is in Syria, so there's no immediate prospect of his arrest. But the families and investigators hope their evidence will slowly lead to justice, in part at least.
For now, we need to be satisfied with the prosecution of some mid-level actors who have found their way into Europe in particular, into the so-called Schengen zone. A number have been identified by us and by our domestic partners, and we should see presently the arrests of some fairly senior former regime officers in Europe. It's better than nothing. Yeah.
The relatives of the victims in the Caesar photos say they'll never give up. They've set up the Caesar Families Association and now at least have some hope.
كيف أنا ما بدي أقوم معي هذا الدليل وكيف أوصله للمحاكم كيف أوصله للعالم إنه تعالوا شوفوا شو عم يصير شوفوا هالهياكل هي قديش هدول متعذبين قديش جوعانين قديش انضربوا قديش نضلوا لحتى وصلوا لهي حالة اللي هي ظهرت بالصور وهي أسماء ليست أرقام هي أسماء أشخاص.
And getting the world to take notice and to care is critical, they say. This is Ali Mamlouk, a key figure in Syria's intelligence service. He reports to President Assad. He's also a suspect in the German case and on an EU sanction list. Yet it's reported he was invited to Rome earlier this year by the Italian security service.
It's really, really scandalous that Italy let him enter the country. What we want to show with all our work is that they need to be aware what they're normalizing. They're normalizing torture, they're normalizing having contact with people that are high-level responsible persons for systematic torture.
For the families of those who died, the normality of having a grave to visit is beyond them. The documents suggest the regime had a known place where some of the bodies were buried. It remains unknown to the families, but they search on anyway.
نحاول على الأقل نعرف وين قبورهم نعرف حتى يعني ولو الأمور أخذت 20 سنة مثلا أنا ما حكون بيكون ابني بيكون حدا متابع الموضوع نعرف إنه هي رفات ابني من الDNA طبعا كلياتنا يعني الأسر اللي اللي إلها مثل ما قلنا أخ أو زوج أو ابن أو أب.
And there are so many lost husbands, sons and fathers. Wives and daughters disappeared too. The families of protesters, some missing as far back as 2011, are only now being told they are dead. For the past few months, the regime has begun releasing the names of hundreds of people who died in its custody, but only the fact of their death. Where are the bodies? What has happened to the tens of thousands who were disappeared? And who, if anyone, will be held to account?